The spring sun beat down mercilessly as Catherine Zimmerman's wagon hit a jagged rock in the narrow canyon pass, the sickening crack of splintering wood echoing off the towering walls of red stone. Her heart sank as the right wheel gave way completely, sending her precious possessions spilling across the dusty trail. Alone in Rattlesnake Canyon, 15 miles from Truckee, Nevada territory, with nothing but wilderness stretching in every direction, the 24-year-old widow felt the bitter sting of despair wash over her. Catherine wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, her chestnut hair coming loose from its practical bun. She had left everything behind in St. Louis after Robert's death, determined to claim the land her cousin had written about. Land of her own where she could start fresh, away from sympathetic glances and whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. "Just perfect," she muttered, climbing down from the wagon seat to inspect the damage. The wheel hadn't merely broken, it had shattered, with several spokes completely snapped and the rim split in 2 places. Even if she had the tools, Catherine knew she lacked the knowledge to repair such damage. The year was 1869, and she was a woman alone in the unforgiving Nevada wilderness. Catherine glanced at the sun's position. 4, perhaps 5 hours of daylight remained. Not nearly enough time to walk to Truckee, and certainly not wise to attempt the journey as night approached. She would need to make camp and hope someone might pass by tomorrow. She had food, water, and her father's old revolver. She could survive one night. As she began gathering wood for a fire, the sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Travelers in these parts could mean salvation or danger. Catherine moved quickly back to the wagon, her hand finding the cool metal of the revolver tucked in her travel bag. A lone rider appeared around the bend, tall in the saddle on a magnificent chestnut horse. He slowed as he spotted her broken-down wagon, and Catherine tightened her grip on the hidden gun. "Afternoon, madam," the stranger called, his voice carrying easily in the canyon. "Looks like you've had some trouble." He approached cautiously, keeping his hands visible on the reins. As he drew closer, Catherine could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 27 or 28. His face was tanned by the sun but clean-shaven, with striking blue eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. His clothing, though dusty from the trail, marked him as a working man rather than a drifter. "Stay where you are," Catherine called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "State your business." The man reined his horse to a stop a respectful distance away. "Name's Vincent Quinn. I work the Silvercrest Ranch about 10 miles west of here." He nodded toward her broken wheel. "Was heading into Truckee for supplies when I saw your predicament. Thought you might need some assistance." Catherine hesitated. Her situation was desperate enough that she couldn't afford to turn away help, yet caution kept her wary. "My wheel's broken beyond repair, Mr. Quinn. Unless you happen to be carrying a spare wagon wheel, I'm not sure what assistance you can offer." A small smile touched Vincent's lips. "No spare wheel, I'm afraid, but I've fixed more than my share of broken wagon parts. May I?" He gestured toward the damaged wheel. Catherine nodded reluctantly, watching as he dismounted with the easy grace of a man who spent his life in the saddle. He moved slowly, seemingly aware of her apprehension, and knelt beside the broken wheel. Vincent examined the damage with careful hands, his fingers tracing the fractured wood. Split rim, broken spokes, not good but not impossible. He looked up at Catherine, shielding his eyes from the sun with one hand. "I can't fix this here, but I can help you make camp for the night and ride to the ranch at first light. We have tools and spare wood there. I could have you rolling again by tomorrow afternoon." "And what would you want in return, Mr. Quinn?" Catherine asked, suspicion edging her voice. Vincent stood, dusting his hands on his trousers. "Nothing, madam, just doing what any decent man would do." He paused, studying her face. "I understand your caution. These parts can be dangerous for a woman traveling alone. If you'd prefer, I can ride to Truckee tonight and send back help instead." There was something in his straightforward gaze that made Catherine reconsider. In the year since Robert's death, she'd learned to read people quickly, a necessary skill for a woman on her own. Vincent Quinn's eyes held no deception she could detect. "No," she said finally. "I'd appreciate your help, Mr. Quinn, and it's Mrs. Zimmerman, Catherine Zimmerman." Vincent tipped his hat. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Zimmerman, though I wish it were under better circumstances." As the sun began its descent, Vincent helped Catherine make a proper camp. He gathered wood for a fire while she sorted through her belongings, separating what could be salvaged from what had been damaged in the accident. When he offered to hunt for fresh meat, Catherine surprised herself by agreeing. He returned an hour later with 2 rabbits. "Hope you don't mind rabbit stew," he said, already setting to work preparing them. "I've eaten worse," Catherine replied, watching as his skilled hands worked with the knife. "Where did you learn to hunt like that?" Vincent glanced up, a half-smile on his face. "My father taught me when I was just a boy, said a man needs to know how to feed himself and those in his care." He was quiet for a moment, focused on his task. "Been on my own since I was 17. These skills have kept me alive." As the rabbit stew simmered over the fire, Catherine found herself sharing pieces of her own story, her childhood in Pennsylvania, her brief marriage to Robert, his death from fever, and her decision to start anew in the Nevada territory. "That takes courage," Vincent said, stirring the pot. "Most widows would have remarried or moved in with family." Catherine stared into the flames. "I'm not most widows, Mr. Quinn." "I can see that," he replied, his tone respectful. After they ate, Vincent insisted on taking the first watch while Catherine slept. "I'll wake you in a few hours," he promised. "The night's quiet, but it's best to be cautious." Catherine settled into her bedroll, the strange comfort of having a protector allowing her to relax for the first time in months. She studied Vincent's profile against the firelight's strong jaw, straight nose, those piercing blue eyes now focused on the darkness beyond their camp. There was something solid about him, dependable in a way that reminded her of her father. "Thank you," she said softly, "for stopping to help." Vincent turned, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "You should get some rest, Mrs. Zimmerman. Tomorrow will be a long day." Catherine nodded and closed her eyes, listening to the crackle of the fire and Vincent's occasional movements as he added wood or adjusted his position. Despite her situation, she felt an unexpected sense of security wash over her as sleep claimed her. True to his word, Vincent woke her halfway through the night to take her turn at watch. Catherine sat wrapped in her woolen shawl, revolver across her lap, as she kept vigil over their small camp. Vincent slept soundly nearby, his breathing deep and even. In the soft glow of moonlight, she noticed details she'd missed before: a small scar near his temple, the calluses on his hands from years of ranch work, the way his hat lay perfectly placed beside his head. Morning arrived with the first tentative calls of birds in the canyon. Catherine had already restarted the fire and was heating coffee when Vincent awoke. He sat up, momentarily confused, then smiled as he spotted her by the fire. "You let me sleep too long," he said, reaching for his hat. "You needed it," Catherine replied simply, pouring coffee into a tin cup and offering it to him. They shared a quick breakfast of leftover stew before Vincent helped Catherine secure her wagon and belongings. "I'll ride to the ranch and be back by midday," he explained. "Will you be all right here alone?" Catherine nodded. "I've been alone for a year, Mr. Quinn. A few more hours won't hurt me." Something flickered across Vincent's face, respect, perhaps, or admiration. "I don't doubt it, Mrs. Zimmerman." He mounted his horse with a fluid motion. "Lock your revolver if anyone approaches. Most folks around here are decent, but there's always exceptions." With a final tip of his hat, Vincent rode off, the sound of hoofbeats gradually fading into the distance. Catherine busied herself organizing her supplies and taking inventory of the damage to her wagon. Besides the wheel, she found a cracked axle support that would need attention. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and Catherine sought shade beneath the wagon. She pulled out her journal, recording the events of the previous day and her current predicament. Writing had become her solace during the lonely months after Robert's death, a way to order her thoughts and process her grief. She wrote of the broken wheel, the canyon's beauty, and Vincent Quinn's unexpected appearance. Her pen hesitated over the page as she tried to describe him, not just his appearance, but the sense of reliability he projected. There was something refreshingly straightforward about the man, devoid of the pretense she'd grown accustomed to in St. Louis society. The sound of approaching horses pulled Catherine from her reverie. She tucked the journal away and retrieved her revolver, moving to stand beside the wagon where she had a clear view of the trail. Relief washed over her as Vincent came into view, leading a mule loaded with tools and supplies. Behind him rode a second man, older with silver streaking his dark beard. "Mrs. Zimmerman," Vincent called, raising a hand in greeting. "This is Thomas Jenkins, the foreman at Silvercrest. He's the best wheelwright in 3 counties. Catherine tucked the revolver into the folds of her skirt and stepped forward. "Mr. Jenkins, I appreciate your coming all this way." The older man dismounted with a grunt. "Any friend of Vince's is worth the trouble, madam. Let's have a look at that wheel." While Thomas examined the damaged wheel, Vincent unloaded the supplies they'd brought: tools, freshly cut oak for new spokes, metal bands for the rim, and provisions that would last several days. "Your foreman didn't need to come himself," Catherine said quietly to Vincent as they worked. Vincent glanced at the older man with evident respect. "Thomas insisted, said he wouldn't trust anyone else to do it right." He lowered his voice. "Truth is, I think he was curious about the woman I rode all night to help." Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "You rode all night?" "Got to the ranch before dawn, gathered what we needed, and came straight back." Vincent shrugged as if it were nothing remarkable. "Couldn't leave you stranded any longer than necessary." Thomas interrupted their conversation with his assessment. "We've got work to do, folks. That wheel needs complete rebuilding, and there's damage to the axle mount I don't like the look of." He eyed Catherine. "This will take time, Mrs. Zimmerman, at least 2 days, maybe 3. Catherine's heart sank. 3 days. I was hoping to reach Truckee by tomorrow." "Better delayed than stranded for good," Thomas replied pragmatically. "Or worse, having that wheel give out on a mountain pass." Vincent placed a reassuring hand on Catherine's shoulder, then quickly withdrew it. "We brought enough supplies to last, and there's good water in the stream just beyond those rocks. We'll have you on your way as soon as possible." The next 3 days fell into a rhythm Catherine hadn't experienced since before Robert's death, the comfort of shared work and purpose. Thomas proved to be a master craftsman, carefully shaping new spokes and rebuilding the wheel rim. Vincent alternated between assisting Thomas and ensuring their camp remained comfortable and secure. On the second afternoon, while Thomas napped in the shade after working through the previous night, Vincent invited Catherine to walk with him to the stream. "You've been cooped up in this canyon too long," he said. "A short walk will do you good." The stream was larger than Catherine had imagined, bubbling over smooth stones with a musical quality that instantly soothed her. She knelt beside it, letting the cool water run through her fingers. "It's beautiful," she murmured, taking in the wildflowers growing along the banks and the distant mountains visible through a break in the canyon walls. Vincent stood a respectful distance away, arms crossed as he leaned against a boulder. "This whole territory is beautiful if you know where to look." He gestured toward the mountains. "The ranch sits at the base of those peaks, best grazing land in the region. Do you own the ranch?" Catherine asked, curious about this man who had so thoroughly disrupted her journey yet somehow made the delay bearable. Vincent shook his head. "Not yet. It belongs to Edward Blackwell. I started working for him 8 years ago as a ranch hand. Worked my way up to managing most of the operation now." A note of pride entered his voice. "Mr. Blackwell's getting on in years with no family to inherit. He's offered to sell it to me gradually, a piece at a time as I can afford it." "That's quite an opportunity," Catherine said, genuinely impressed. "It is." Vincent's eyes took on a distant look. "By this time next year, I'll own the east pasture and the small cabin that sits on it. 5 years, maybe less, I'll have half the ranch. 10 years, he shrugged, who knows?" Catherine studied him, struck by his quiet ambition. "You have it all planned out." "Have to when you start with nothing." Vincent's gaze returned to her. "What about you? What's waiting for you in Truckee land?" Catherine replied. "My cousin Oliver wrote to me about a parcel just outside of town. Good soil, a small orchard already planted." She smiled at the thought. "I want to grow things, Mr. Quinn, vegetables, flowers, maybe eventually expand to a proper farm." She hesitated. "Robert and I never had children. After he died, I realized I still needed to create something, to watch something grow under my care." Vincent nodded slowly, as if truly understanding. There's no better feeling than seeing something thrive because of your efforts. He pushed away from the boulder. We should head back. Thomas will be waking soon, ready to work. That evening, after a dinner of venison Thomas had brought from the ranch, the three of them sat around the fire. Thomas entertained them with stories of his days driving cattle from Texas, painting vivid pictures of stampedes, river crossings, and the characters he'd met along the way. "What about you, Mrs. Zimmerman?" Thomas asked eventually. "What brings a refined lady like yourself out to these parts alone?" Catherine shared the abbreviated version of her story, the one she had perfected for strangers. Thomas listened attentively, occasionally nodding in understanding. "Brave decision," he commented when she finished. "The territory needs more people with that kind of determination." He glanced between Catherine and Vincent. "Well, these old bones need rest. Don't stay up too late, you two. We've got more work tomorrow." After Thomas retired to his bedroll, a comfortable silence fell between Catherine and Vincent. The fire crackled, sending sparks upward to join the stars. "He's right, you know," Vincent said finally. "About your bravery." Catherine shook her head. "It wasn't bravery that brought me here, Mr. Quinn. It was necessity." Vincent studied her across the flames. "Call me Vincent, please." After 3 days of sharing meals and work, Mr. Quinn seems too formal. "Vincent, then," Catherine agreed, "and you may call me Catherine." "Catherine," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "I think sometimes necessity and bravery are the same thing. Doing what must be done, regardless of fear." She considered this. "Perhaps you're right." Vincent added another log to the fire. "Tell me about your land in Truckee, the part you didn't share with Thomas." Surprised by his perception, Catherine found herself speaking more freely than she had in months. She described not just the practical aspects of the property, but her dreams for it, the flower gardens she would plant, the vegetable plots, the improvements she planned for the small cabin. "I want to wake up each morning and see something I've built," she concluded. "Something that's entirely mine, that no one can take away if—" She stopped abruptly, realizing how much she was revealing. "If something happens to your husband," Vincent finished quietly. "Because that's what happened with Robert, wasn't it? You lost everything when he died." Catherine looked away, blinking back unexpected tears. "His family took the house, the business, said a woman couldn't manage it, left me with barely enough to start over." Vincent's jaw tightened. "That wasn't right." "No," Catherine agreed. "It wasn't, but it was legal." She took a deep breath. "That's why this land matters so much. It will be in my name, mine alone." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. "I hope you find what you're looking for in Truckee, Catherine. You deserve that peace." The sincerity in his voice made something shift inside her, a small but definite change, like ice beginning to thaw. "Thank you, Vincent." By the third day, Thomas had completed the new wheel and repaired the damaged axle. Catherine watched in admiration as he and Vincent carefully fitted the wheel onto the wagon, making final adjustments to ensure it ran true. "There," Thomas announced, stepping back to admire his work. "Good as new, better, in fact. This wheel's solid oak, not that softer wood they used originally. Should last you years with proper care." "I can't thank you enough," Catherine said, truly grateful. "How much do I owe you for the materials and labor?" Thomas waved away her question. "Consider it a welcome gift to the territory. Besides," he added with a meaningful glance at Vincent, "some debts can't be measured in dollars." Vincent cleared his throat. "Thomas, why don't you start packing up? I'll help Mrs. Zimmerman load her wagon." As they worked together loading Catherine's belongings, Vincent seemed unusually quiet. She watched him from the corner of her eye, noting the careful way he handled her possessions and the thoughtful arrangement of each item to distribute the weight evenly. "You've done this before," she observed. Vincent nodded. "Moved enough times in my life to know how to pack a wagon properly." He secured a crate with a length of rope. "The trail to Truckee has some rough patches. Everything needs to be tied down well." Catherine hesitated. "You know the way to Truckee like the back of my hand." "Make the trip every month for supplies." She took a deep breath. Would you consider guiding me there? I'd pay you, of course." Vincent looked up, surprise evident on his face. "You don't need to pay me, Catherine." He seemed to consider something, then added, But yes, I'd be happy to guide you to Truckee. It's only a day's journey from here if we start early." Relief washed over her. The thought of navigating the unfamiliar territory alone had been weighing on her mind. "Thank you. I'd feel much safer with someone who knows the way." A ghost of a smile touched Vincent's lips. "We'll leave at first light tomorrow. The sooner you reach your land, the sooner you can start building that life you've been dreaming of." That evening, Thomas bid them farewell, heading back to the ranch with the mule and leftover supplies. "Don't dawdle too long getting back," he told Vincent with a knowing look that made Catherine wonder what had been said between the two men when she wasn't present. After Thomas departed, Catherine and Vincent shared a simple supper of beans and cornbread. The ease that had developed between them over the past days made conversation flow naturally. Vincent spoke of his childhood in Missouri, his decision to head west at 17, and the various jobs that had eventually led him to Silvercrest Ranch. "What about family?" Catherine asked. "Do you have anyone back east?" Vincent shook his head. "My parents died when I was 16, influenza. Had a younger brother who went to California during the gold rush. Haven't heard from him in 5 years." He shrugged, but Catherine caught the hint of old pain in his eyes. "Made my own family of sorts out here. Thomas, Mr. Blackwell, the other hands at the ranch." "It sounds like you found a home," Catherine said softly. "I have." Vincent met her gaze across the fire. "Sometimes home finds you when you least expect it." The warmth in his eyes made Catherine's heart beat faster. She looked away, suddenly conscious of how isolated they were and how comfortable she had become in this man's presence. A woman alone with a man she had known only 3 days, yet somehow it felt as if they had known each other much longer. "We should get some rest," she said, rising to her feet. "If we're to leave at first light," Vincent nodded, respecting her sudden retreat. "Of course, I'll bank the fire." Catherine lay awake in her bedroll long after Vincent's breathing had evened out in sleep. The stars above the canyon shone with remarkable clarity, each one a pinprick of light in the vast darkness. She found herself wondering about the path her life had taken, the tragedy that had sent her westward, and the broken wagon wheel that had brought Vincent Quinn into her life. Was it merely chance? Or something more deliberate, a hand guiding her toward something she hadn't known she was seeking? Morning came with a chill in the air that promised a hot day ahead. They broke camp efficiently, working together with the unspoken coordination of people who had quickly learned each other's rhythms. By the time the sun crested the canyon walls, Catherine's wagon was ready, with Vincent's horse tethered behind. "The trail widens about a mile ahead," Vincent explained as Catherine climbed onto the wagon seat. "We'll make better time once we're out of the canyon." He was right. Once they emerged from Rattlesnake Canyon, the terrain opened into a vast landscape of sagebrush and distant mountains. Vincent rode beside the wagon, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing stories about the region. "See that formation there?" he asked, gesturing toward an unusual rock outcropping. "Local Paiutes say it's a warrior turned to stone for betraying his tribe. Folks around here call it Sentinel Rock." Catherine studied the formation, seeing how it indeed resembled a human figure standing watch over the valley. "Do you believe the legend?" Vincent smiled. "I believe every landscape carries its stories. Whether they're literally true doesn't much matter." The day grew warmer as they traveled, the sun beating down on the dusty trail. They stopped at midday beside a small creek to water the horses and eat a cold lunch. Catherine spread her shawl on the ground, and they sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree. "We're making good time," Vincent said, accepting a piece of bread from Catherine. "Should reach Truckee by late afternoon." Catherine nodded, suddenly aware that their journey was nearly over. Soon she would be in Truckee, starting the new life she had planned, and Vincent would return to his ranch. The thought left her with an unexpected sense of loss. "What will you do once you return to Silvercrest?" she asked, trying to sound merely conversational. Vincent took a drink from his canteen before answering. "Spring calving is nearly done. Next comes branding, then moving the herds to summer pasture." He squinted at the horizon. "Always something that needs doing on a ranch." "You enjoy it," Catherine observed. "It's in your voice when you talk about the work." "I do." Vincent turned to look at her directly. What about you? Are you looking forward to starting work on your land? Very much, Catherine replied honestly, though I admit I'm nervous. There's so much I don't know about farming in this territory. Vincent was quiet for a moment. People in Truckee are generally helpful. The widow Hanson on the north edge of town knows more about growing things in this soil than anyone. She'd be a good person to seek advice from. He hesitated. And Truckee is only 15 miles from the ranch, if you ever needed help with anything. The offer hung in the air between them, neither quite acknowledging the implications. Catherine busied herself repacking their lunch supplies. We should continue if we want to reach town by nightfall. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, the first buildings of Truckee came into view. Catherine felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This small frontier town would be her home now, these streets, these buildings, these people she had yet to meet. Vincent guided them down the main street, past the general store, the saloon, and the small church at the far end. People glanced curiously at Catherine, a new face in a town where everyone knew everyone. Your cousin's land is just past the north edge of town, Vincent said. We'll be there in another 15 minutes. The property, when they reached it, was both exactly as Oliver had described and somehow different than Catherine had imagined. The cabin was smaller than she'd expected, weathered by years of sun and wind. The orchard consisted of perhaps 20 trees, their branches beginning to bud with spring promise. A small creek ran along the western edge of the property, and beyond it stretched open land to the distant mountains. Vincent helped Catherine down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. They stood together, surveying what would be her new home. It needs work, Vincent said candidly. But the bones are good, solid foundation, sturdy roof, the land's fertile with water year-round. Catherine took a deep breath, taking in the scent of earth and new growth. It's perfect, Vincent looked at her in surprise. Perfect? It's a beginning, Catherine explained, her eyes alight with possibility. My beginning. Something shifted in Vincent's expression, admiration, perhaps, or understanding. Yes, it is. He helped her unload the essentials from the wagon, carrying her trunk into the cabin and bringing in firewood from the pile stacked against the north wall. Catherine moved about the small space, opening windows to let in fresh air and making mental notes of what needed to be done first. As twilight deepened into dusk, Vincent built a fire in the stone fireplace and lit the oil lamp he found on the mantel. The cabin took on a golden glow, shadows dancing on the rough-hewn walls. I should go, he said finally, standing awkwardly by the door. It's getting late. Catherine felt a sudden panic at the thought of being alone in this unfamiliar place. It's already dark. Surely it would be safer to travel in the morning, Vincent hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and practicality. I wouldn't want to impose. You wouldn't be, Catherine assured him quickly. There's plenty of room. You could sleep here by the fire. She gestured to the main room. It's the least I can offer after everything you've done. After a moment's consideration, Vincent nodded. If you're certain it wouldn't be improper. We're in the Nevada territory, Mr. Quinn, Catherine said with a small smile. I suspect the rules of propriety are somewhat different here than in St. Louis. Vincent returned her smile. Just the same, I'll be gone at first light. They shared a simple supper from Catherine's provisions, sitting at the small table by the fireplace. As they ate, they discussed improvements Catherine might make to the cabin and land a vegetable garden near the creek, repairs to the sagging front porch, perhaps eventually expanding the cabin itself. You should consider raising chickens, Vincent suggested. Good for eggs and meat, and they're fairly easy to keep. I hadn't thought of that, Catherine admitted. I know almost nothing about raising livestock. It's not difficult to learn, Vincent assured her. Start small, a few chickens, maybe a milk cow eventually. As the evening wore on, their conversation shifted to more personal topics. Catherine found herself sharing stories of her childhood that she hadn't thought of in years. The Christmas her father built her a dollhouse. The summer she learned to swim in the creek behind their Pennsylvania home. The first garden she planted with her mother. Vincent listened attentively, occasionally offering stories of his own. He described his first job breaking horses on a Kansas ranch, the winter he spent trapping in the mountains, the pride he felt when Mr. Blackwell first trusted him to manage a cattle drive. "You've lived more in your 28 years than most men do in a lifetime," Catherine observed. Vincent shrugged. "Just did what needed doing to survive. Nothing remarkable about that." "I disagree," Catherine said softly. "There's something remarkable about building a life from nothing, about facing each challenge without losing your humanity." Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who understood what it meant to forge a path alone. The moment stretched, electric with possibility, until Vincent cleared his throat and rose to his feet. "It's late. You must be tired after our journey." Catherine nodded, suddenly aware of the impropriety of their situation despite her earlier dismissal of such concerns. "Yes, of course. I'll make up my bed in the back room. You can use these blankets by the fire." As she prepared for sleep in the small bedroom, Catherine found her thoughts returning to Vincent Quinn, his quiet strength, his unfailing kindness, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. In the 3 days since their meeting in Rattlesnake Canyon, he had become more than a chance rescuer. He had become, what, a friend, something more. She shook her head at her foolish thoughts. Vincent had his life at Silvercrest Ranch, his plans to gradually purchase the property. She had her new beginning here on this small farm. Their paths had crossed briefly and would now diverge again. That was the natural order of things. Yet as she drifted into sleep, Catherine found herself wishing it could be otherwise. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the cabin's east-facing windows. Catherine woke to the sound of movement in the main room and the aroma of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly and emerged to find Vincent tending the fire, a pot of coffee hanging from the iron hook in the fireplace. "Good morning," he said, straightening up. "Hope I didn't wake you. Thought you might appreciate coffee before I left." Catherine tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly conscious of her appearance after a night's sleep. "Thank you. That was thoughtful." They shared a quiet breakfast of the last of their provisions. Vincent spoke of his plans to return to Truckee within the week for ranch supplies, offering to bring anything Catherine might need from the general store. Catherine made a list of essentials: seeds for planting, tools she lacked, provisions to tide her over until her garden began producing. All too soon, it was time for Vincent to leave. He saddled his horse while Catherine stood by, watching his efficient movements with a growing sense of loss. "Thank you," she said as he prepared to mount, "for everything, the wheel guiding me here. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along that canyon road." Vincent adjusted his hat, eyes meeting hers. "You'd have managed. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Catherine Zimmerman." He hesitated, then added, "But I'm glad our paths crossed." He mounted his horse with practiced ease, gathering the reins. For a moment he seemed about to say something more, but then simply tipped his hat. "Good luck with your land. I'll see you soon with those supplies." Catherine nodded, forcing a smile. "Safe travels, Vincent." She stood watching as he rode away, the distance between them growing until he was just a speck on the horizon. Only then did she turn back to her cabin, and the work that awaited her. The days that followed fell into a rhythm of hard work and solitude. Catherine cleaned the cabin from top to bottom, repaired what she could of the sagging porch, and began preparing the soil for planting. She introduced herself to her nearest neighbors, the Wilsons, whose farm lay half a mile to the east, and indeed the widow Hanson, whose knowledge of local growing conditions proved invaluable. Each evening, exhausted from the day's labor, Catherine would sit on her porch and watch the sunset paint the western mountains. And each evening, her thoughts would inevitably turn to Vincent Quinn. True to his word, Vincent returned to Truckee a week later. Catherine was in town purchasing supplies when she heard a familiar voice behind her in the general store. "Mrs. Zimmerman. How's that wheel holding up?" She turned to find Vincent standing there, his tall frame blocking the afternoon sun from the doorway. He looked much as he had when they parted, perhaps a bit more trail dust on his clothes, but the same clear blue eyes and half-smile that made her heart beat faster. "Mr. Quinn," she replied, surprising herself with how formal she sounded. "The wheel is performing admirably. Your friend Thomas does excellent work." Vincent nodded, stepping further into the store. Glad to hear it. How's the farm coming along? Slowly but surely, Catherine said. I've prepared beds for vegetables and mended the worst of the cabin's problems. The widow Hanson has been most helpful with advice about planting. Good, I hoped you'd seek her out. Vincent glanced at her purchases on the counter: seeds, tools, a new kettle to replace the rusted one she'd found in the cabin. Looks like you're settling in properly. I am. Catherine hesitated, then asked, and the ranch, how are things at Silvercrest? Busy, spring's always busy. Vincent shifted his weight. Actually, I brought something for you, it's outside. Curious, Catherine followed him out of the store. Tied to the hitching post beside his horse was a small wagon drawn by a sturdy brown mule. It's not much, Vincent said, gesturing toward it. But I noticed you didn't have any way to transport things between your farm and town. The mule's gentle, easy to handle even if you're not used to livestock. Catherine stared at the wagon and mule, then at Vincent. I can't accept this, it's too much. It's not a gift, Vincent clarified quickly. It's a loan, until you get on your feet. The mule was extra at the ranch, and the wagon's been sitting unused since Mr. Blackwell got his new one. He met her gaze directly. You need it more than we do right now. Catherine recognized the careful way he'd framed the offer to preserve her pride. She ran a hand along the wagon's wooden side, noting its solid construction and good repair. A loan, then. I'll return them when I can afford my own. No hurry, Vincent assured her, a relieved smile touching his lips. Now, what else do you need that might not be on your list? Thomas sent along some of his wife's preserved vegetables and bread. Said a woman working a farm needs proper feeding. By the time they'd finished loading Catherine's purchases and Thomas's food offerings into the small wagon, the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. Vincent glanced at the sky, then at Catherine. I'd best be heading back if I want to make it before dark. Catherine nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Of course, thank you again for the wagon and mule. Vincent hesitated, then said, I'll be back in town next week. There's a social at the church on Saturday, nothing fancy, just the locals gathering for music and food. He cleared his throat. Might be a good way for you to meet more of your neighbors. Was he inviting her? Catherine wasn't sure, but her heart quickened at the possibility. I'll consider it. It does sound like a fine opportunity to become acquainted with the community. Vincent nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. Well then, until next week. As she drove her borrowed wagon back to the farm, Catherine found herself looking forward to Saturday with unexpected anticipation. The prospect of seeing Vincent again, of perhaps spending more time in his company, made her smile despite her exhaustion. The week passed in a blur of hard work. Catherine planted her vegetable garden, repaired fences around the orchard, and began clearing an overgrown flower bed beside the cabin. Each night she fell into bed aching but satisfied with her progress. Saturday arrived clear and warm. Catherine washed her hair and pinned it in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun. She chose her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the gray of her eyes and the cameo brooch that had been her mother's. As she drove the wagon into town, Catherine tried to temper her expectations. Vincent had merely mentioned the social. He hadn't explicitly invited her to attend with him. For all she knew, he might not even be there. The churchyard was already filled with people when Catherine arrived. Tables laden with food stood beneath the trees, and someone was tuning a fiddle near the steps. Children ran playing between the adults, their laughter carrying on the evening air. Catherine tied the mule to a hitching post and smoothed her skirts, suddenly nervous. She had attended countless socials in St. Louis, yet this felt different, more significant somehow. Mrs. Zimmerman. She turned to find Vincent approaching, hat in hand. He'd cleaned up for the occasion, his dark hair still damp from washing, his shirt crisp and white against his sun-darkened skin. Mr. Quinn, she replied, unable to keep the smile from her face, you made it back to town. Wouldn't have missed it. His eyes took in her appearance, lingering for a moment on her carefully arranged hair. You look lovely. The simple compliment warmed Catherine more than it should have. Thank you, you look quite presentable yourself. Vincent offered his arm. May I introduce you to some of the locals? There are people here you should know if you're going to be part of the community. I'd appreciate that, Catherine said, placing her hand on his arm. The evening passed in a pleasant blur. Vincent introduced Catherine to what seemed like half the population of Truckee the blacksmith and his wife, the schoolteacher, the banker, families who farmed the surrounding lands. Everyone welcomed her warmly, curious about the widow who had traveled alone from St. Louis to start a new life in their midst. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit around the churchyard, casting a golden glow over the gathering. The fiddler was joined by a man with a guitar and another with a harmonica, and people began to clear a space for dancing. Vincent, who had stayed by Catherine's side throughout the evening, glanced at the forming dance area. "Would you care to dance, Mrs. Zimmerman?" Catherine hesitated only briefly. "I would, Mr. Quinn." He led her to join the other couples as the musicians struck up a lively tune. Vincent's hand was warm at her waist, his grip firm but gentle as he guided her through the steps. He moved with surprising grace for such a tall man, and Catherine found herself relaxing into the dance, enjoying the simple pleasure of movement and music. "You dance well," she commented as they circled with the other couples. Vincent's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Don't sound so surprised. We do have some civilization out here in the territory." "I didn't mean," Catherine began, then saw the teasing light in his eyes. "You're making fun of me." "Maybe a little," Vincent admitted. "It's not often I get to see Mrs. Catherine Zimmerman flustered." As the evening wore on, they danced several more times, interspersed with conversations with various townspeople. Catherine found herself genuinely enjoying the company and the sense of community that permeated the gathering. The musicians eventually slowed to a waltz, and Vincent once again offered his hand. This dance brought them closer, his arm more firmly around her waist, their faces near enough that Catherine could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. "You're fitting in well," Vincent observed softly. "People are impressed by what you've already accomplished at your farm." "Word travels fast in a small town," Catherine noted. "That it does. The widow Hanson has been singing your praises, says you're the first newcomer she's met who actually listened to her advice about soil and planting." Catherine laughed. "She knows what she's talking about. I'd be a fool not to listen." They fell silent as the music continued, moving together with increasing familiarity. Catherine was acutely aware of Vincent's hand at her waist, the clean scent of soap and sunshine that clung to him, the steady rhythm of their steps. "Catherine," Vincent said finally, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I've been thinking about your farm." "Oh." Catherine looked up at him, curious. "The orchard needs pruning before summer if you want a good harvest, and that creek bank should be reinforced before the fall rains." He hesitated. "I could help, on Sundays when work at the ranch is lighter." Catherine's step faltered slightly, but Vincent guided her smoothly back into the rhythm of the dance. "That's very generous, but I couldn't impose on your only day of rest." "It's not an imposition if it's offered freely," Vincent replied. "Besides, some tasks are better with two sets of hands." Catherine considered his offer, torn between her fierce independence and the practical reality that some jobs would indeed be easier with help. "Perhaps a trade, then. You help with the heavy work, and I'll provide Sunday dinner. A fair exchange." Vincent's smile warmed his entire face. "I believe that would be equitable, Mrs. Zimmerman." As the waltz ended, they remained standing together for a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them. Then the spell was broken by a call for the final dance of the evening, and they rejoined the forming circle. Later, as Vincent walked Catherine to her wagon, the night air had cooled and stars blanketed the clear sky. Most of the other attendees had already departed, leaving the churchyard quiet except for the musicians packing up their instruments. "Thank you for introducing me around," Catherine said as they reached the hitching post. "It made the evening much more enjoyable than it would have been otherwise." "My pleasure." Vincent untied the mule and checked the harness before helping Catherine up to the wagon seat. "So, about Sunday. Would tomorrow be too soon to start on that orchard?" Catherine smiled down at him. "Not too soon at all. Shall I expect you mid-morning?" "I'll be there." Vincent stepped back, hat in hand. "Good night, Catherine." "Good night, Vincent." As she drove home beneath the starlit sky, Catherine found herself humming the waltz they had danced together. a contentment she hadn't felt in years settling over her. True to his word, Vincent arrived at Catherine's farm shortly before noon the next day. He brought tools for pruning the orchard and lumber for reinforcing the creek bank, along with a small burlap bag that turned out to contain coffee beans from his own supply. "Noticed you were running low," he explained when Catherine raised an eyebrow at the gift. They spent the afternoon in the orchard, Vincent demonstrating the proper way to prune the apple and pear trees to encourage better fruit production. Catherine proved a quick study, and soon they worked in companionable silence, moving from tree to tree with increasing efficiency. "Where did you learn so much about orchards?" Catherine asked as they paused to rest in the shade. "My grandfather had apple trees in Missouri," Vincent replied. "Spent summers helping him tend them as a boy." He gestured toward the trees they had already pruned. "These are good stock, just neglected. You'll have a fine harvest come fall." They worked until the sun began its descent, then returned to the cabin where Catherine had a chicken roasting in the oven. The domestic scene, Vincent washing up at the outdoor pump while Catherine set the table and prepared vegetables, felt strangely natural, as if they had done this many times before. Over dinner, they discussed plans for the farm. Vincent sketched ideas for expanding the vegetable garden and suggested crops that would thrive in the local soil. Catherine shared her vision for renovating the cabin, adding another room and perhaps a proper front porch with a swing. "Sounds like you're planning to stay," Vincent observed, pouring them each a cup of coffee. Catherine nodded. "I am. This place already feels more like home than St. Louis ever did after Robert died." She traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "What about you?" "Will you stay at Silvercrest once you own it?" "That's the plan," Vincent confirmed. "Been working toward it too long to change course now." Catherine calculated the distance between their properties. 15 miles isn't so far. Vincent's eyes met hers over the rim of his coffee cup. "No," he agreed softly. "It isn't." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibility until Catherine stood to clear the dishes. Vincent insisted on helping, and they worked side by side at the wash basin, their hands occasionally brushing in the soapy water. As twilight deepened into dusk, Vincent reluctantly prepared to leave. "I should get back before full dark," he said, gathering his hat. "Thank you for dinner. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed a home-cooked meal in such pleasant company." Catherine walked with him to where his horse was tethered. "Thank you for your help with the orchard. It would have taken me weeks to do alone what we accomplished in one afternoon." Vincent mounted his horse, looking down at her in the gathering darkness. "Next Sunday, we'll tackle that creek bank." It wasn't a question but a quiet certainty, as if their Sunday arrangement was already established. Catherine nodded. "I'll plan to make a roast." "Something to look forward to," Vincent said, his voice warm. He tipped his hat. "Good night, Catherine." "Good night, Vincent. Safe journey." She watched him ride away until the darkness swallowed his figure, then returned to the cabin. Inside, evidence of his presence remained: the coffee he had brought, the jacket he had hung by the door and forgotten to take, the sketch of garden plans on a piece of paper on the table. Small things that somehow made the cabin feel less empty. The following weeks fell into a pleasant pattern. Vincent came each Sunday, arriving by mid-morning and staying until dusk. Together they tackled projects around the farm, reinforcing the creek bank, repairing the cabin roof, building a chicken coop, and purchasing 6 hens from a neighboring farm. Each visit ended with dinner at Catherine's table, their conversations growing more personal and comfortable as spring blossomed into early summer. Between Vincent's visits, Catherine threw herself into her work. The vegetable garden flourished under her care, the newly pruned orchard showed promising signs of a good harvest, and the chickens began providing eggs enough for her needs with extra to trade in town. She made friends among the local women, particularly the widow Hanson, who taught her to preserve vegetables and fruits for the coming winter. Catherine saw Vincent occasionally in town during the week, brief encounters that always left her smiling. Sometimes he would join her for lunch at the small cafe or help load her purchases into her wagon. People began to notice their friendship, and Catherine occasionally caught knowing looks from the townswomen when Vincent tipped his hat to her on the street. One Sunday in early July, nearly 3 months after their first meeting in Rattlesnake Canyon, Vincent arrived later than usual. Catherine had been watching for him since mid-morning, trying not to worry as noon came and went without any sign of his approach. When he finally appeared on the horizon, she could tell something was different. He rode more slowly, and as he drew nearer, she saw that he was leading a second horse, a gentle-looking mare with a white blaze down her face. "I was beginning to worry," Catherine said as he dismounted, trying to keep her tone light. "Is everything all right at the ranch?" Vincent nodded, removing his hat. "Everything's fine. I'm sorry I'm late." He gestured toward the mare. "I had a stop to make along the way." Catherine approached the second horse cautiously. "She's beautiful. Are you delivering her somewhere?" in a manner of speaking. Vincent cleared his throat. "She's for you, Catherine." Catherine's hand, which had been reaching to stroke the mare's nose, froze in mid-air. "For me." "I don't understand. You need your own horse," Vincent explained. "The mule and wagon are fine for town, but a horse would give you more freedom to explore your land and beyond." He patted the mare's neck. "This is Daisy. She's 8 years old, well-trained, and has the sweetest disposition of any horse I've known." Catherine shook her head slowly. "Vincent, I can't accept a horse. It's far too expensive a gift." "It's not exactly a gift," Vincent said, echoing his words from when he had brought the wagon and mule. "Mr. Blackwell is reducing his stock before winter. Daisy was going to be sold anyway. I simply arranged to buy her for you." He hesitated. "Consider it an investment in your farm, a neighbor helping a neighbor." Catherine stroked the mare's soft nose, torn between practical need and pride. "A neighbor helping a neighbor," she repeated softly. "Besides," Vincent added with a small smile, "I thought perhaps you might enjoy riding occasionally instead of always working. There are beautiful trails in the foothills that are best explored on horseback." The thought was tempting. Catherine had enjoyed riding in her youth but had few opportunities after her marriage to Robert, who considered it an unnecessary activity for a businessman's wife. "I haven't ridden in years," she admitted. "I'm probably quite rusty. Like most things, it comes back quickly enough." Vincent held out the reins. "Will you accept her? She needs a good home, and I can think of none better than here with you." Put that way, how could she refuse? Catherine took the reins, feeling the weight of responsibility and the unexpected gift of freedom they represented. "Thank you, Vincent. I'll take good care of her." After settling Daisy in the small lean-to stable, Catherine and Vincent turned to the day's planned task, building a stone wall along the garden's northern edge to protect the plants from wind. The work was physically demanding, requiring them to gather suitable rocks from the creek bed and fit them together without mortar. As they worked side by side under the summer sun, Catherine found herself watching Vincent when he wasn't looking, the confident movements of his hands as he placed each stone, the concentration in his expression, the way the muscles in his arms flexed with each heavy rock he lifted. At one point, he caught her looking and held her gaze for a long moment before returning to his task. Something had shifted between them, subtle but definite, like the first whisper of autumn in the late summer air. By late afternoon, the wall was half completed and both were exhausted. They sat in the shade of the porch, drinking cool water from the well. "We won't finish today," Vincent observed, wiping sweat from his brow. "No," Catherine agreed, "but we've made good progress. Another Sunday should see it done." Vincent nodded, setting down his empty cup. "I should clean up before dinner." He stood, stretching his back. "Mind if I use the pump?" While Vincent washed away the dust and sweat of their labor, Catherine prepared their meal, a beef roast with vegetables from her garden and fresh bread she had baked that morning. She changed from her work clothes into a simple cotton dress, running a brush through her hair before pinning it back up. When Vincent returned to the cabin, he had changed his shirt and combed his damp hair. His freshly shaved face made him look younger, more vulnerable somehow. They ate on the porch to catch the evening breeze, watching the sunset paint the western mountains gold and pink and purple. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on the progress of Catherine's farm, developments at Silvercrest Ranch, and news from town. "Mr. Blackwell signed over the east pasture yesterday," Vincent mentioned as they finished their meal. 20 acres, including the small cabin. "It's officially mine now." Catherine smiled, genuinely pleased for him. Congratulations, Vincent, that's wonderful news. The first step toward owning the entire ranch. Vincent nodded, his expression thoughtful. Been thinking about fixing up that cabin. It's simple, just 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but solid. Needs a woman's touch, though. Something in his tone made Catherine's heart beat faster. She busied herself gathering their empty plates. I'm sure you'll make it comfortable in time. Vincent helped her carry the dishes inside, then lingered by the door while Catherine lit the oil lamp. The golden light cast his features in sharp relief, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the intensity in his eyes as he watched her. Catherine, he said finally, his voice low and serious, there's something I need to ask you. Catherine set the lamp on the table, her hands suddenly unsteady. Yes, Vincent took a step toward her, then stopped as if uncertain of his welcome. These past months, working beside you, sharing meals, watching you build something from nothing. He took a deep breath. You're the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. Vincent, please let me finish, he interrupted gently. I'm not a man who speaks easily about feelings, but I need to say this. His eyes held hers steadily. I care for you, Catherine, more than as a friend or neighbor, and I hope you might feel something similar for me. The simple honesty of his declaration touched Catherine deeply. I do, she admitted softly, very much. Relief washed over Vincent's face, followed quickly by determination. Then I need to ask, would you consider joining your life with mine? Not immediately, we should have a proper courtship, but eventually, Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Are you proposing marriage, Vincent Quinn? A smile touched his lips. In my clumsy way, yes, I am. Catherine closed the distance between them, reaching up to place a hand against his cheek. There's nothing clumsy about it. Vincent covered her hand with his own, turning his face slightly to press a kiss against her palm. Is that a yes? I would be honored to be courted by you with the intention of marriage if we find we suit, Catherine clarified, her eyes bright with emotion. Vincent's smile broadened. That'll do for now. He hesitated, then leaned down slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. When she didn't move away, he pressed his lips gently against hers. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. Catherine responded in kind, her hand moving from his cheek to the nape of his neck. Vincent's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened into something more certain. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the church social, he confessed. I've wanted you to, Catherine replied, a smile in her voice. Vincent straightened, though he kept his arms around her. I should go, it's getting late, and if I stay much longer. Catherine nodded in understanding. They were both adults who had been alone too long, and certain boundaries were best maintained during courtship. Vincent pressed one more quick kiss to her lips before releasing her. I'll speak to Reverend Parker about calling on you officially. Do things properly. Always the gentleman, Catherine teased gently, trying to be, Vincent admitted, though you make it challenging. They walked together to where his horse waited. The night was clear, stars brilliant against the dark sky, a crescent moon providing just enough light to see by. Vincent mounted, looking down at Catherine with an expression that made her heart swell. Until Wednesday then, for dinner at the cafe as planned, Catherine nodded. I'll look forward to it. She watched him ride away, a lightness in her spirit that had been absent for years. Something broken had been mended, not just her wagon wheel in that canyon 3 months ago, but something deeper. Something she hadn't realized needed repair until Vincent Quinn had come into her life. The courtship that followed was conducted with proper respect for convention while acknowledging the deep connection that had already formed between them. Vincent called on Catherine 3 evenings a week, taking her for rides in the foothills, escorting her to church and community gatherings, and helping with projects around her farm. Together they finished the stone wall, built proper shelves in the cabin's small pantry, and harvested the first fruits from the orchard. The town quickly grew accustomed to seeing them together, and few were surprised when, 2 months after Vincent's proposal, Reverend Parker announced their engagement from the pulpit one Sunday morning. The wedding was set for October, when the fall harvest would be complete and before winter weather made travel difficult. Catherine threw herself into preparations, adding curtains to the cabin windows, sewing a simple but elegant wedding dress, and putting up preserves for the winter ahead. Vincent divided his time between Silvercrest Ranch and preparing his newly acquired cabin for their married life. He added a proper bedroom, expanded the kitchen, and built a covered porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sun set over the mountains. 2 weeks before the wedding, Catherine rode Daisy to Vincent's cabin to see the progress. She found him on the roof, laying the final shingles. "It's coming along nicely," she called up to him. Vincent turned at the sound of her voice, a smile spreading across his face. "Catherine, I wasn't expecting you today." He made his way carefully to the ladder and climbed down to greet her. "I finished my canning earlier than expected and thought I'd surprise you." Catherine dismounted, tying Daisy to the hitching post Vincent had installed. "May I see inside?" Vincent hesitated. "I was hoping to show you when it was completely finished. There's still some work to do." "Consider it a preliminary inspection," Catherine suggested with a smile. "I promise not to judge too harshly." Vincent relented, leading her through the front door into what would be their home. The main room was larger than Catherine had expected, with windows that allowed natural light to flood the space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and Vincent had built shelves on either side for books and keepsakes. The kitchen, though small, was well planned with adequate storage and a proper stove rather than just a fireplace for cooking. The bedroom held a bed frame Vincent had crafted himself, waiting only for the mattress being made in town. "It's wonderful," Catherine said honestly, turning to face Vincent in the center of the main room. "You've done so much work." "Worth every splinter and sore muscle," Vincent replied, "knowing it's where we'll build our life together." Catherine moved to the window, looking out at the view of mountains and pasture. "I can see why you love this land so much. It's beautiful." Vincent came to stand behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "More beautiful now with you in it." Catherine leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. 2 weeks, she said softly. 2 weeks, Vincent agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and cool, with just enough crispness in the air to hint at the winter to come. Catherine dressed in her cabin with the help of the widow Hanson and Sarah Wilson, who had become her closest friends in Truckee. Her wedding dress was simple but elegant cream-colored cotton with lace trim she had carefully saved from her mother's wedding gown. She wore her hair partially up, with soft curls framing her face and a small wreath of late-blooming wildflowers crowning her head. "You look beautiful, dear," the widow Hanson declared, adjusting the flowers. "That young man won't know what hit him." The small church in Truckee was filled to capacity, the entire community turning out to witness the union of the newcomer widow and the respected rancher. Vincent waited at the altar, more nervous than he had been facing down a stampede, Thomas standing beside him as his best man. When Catherine appeared at the church door on the arm of Mr. Wilson, who had offered to give her away, Vincent felt his breath catch in his throat. She seemed to glow in the autumn sunlight streaming through the windows, her smile radiant as her eyes found his. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through all life's joys and sorrows. When Reverend Parker pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed Catherine with a tenderness that brought tears to more than one observer's eyes. The celebration afterward was held in the churchyard, with tables laden with food contributed by every family in the community. There was music and dancing, congratulations and well wishes, and gifts both practical and sentimental for the newly wedded couple. As the sun began to set, Vincent and Catherine departed for their new home, riding side by side on horseback rather than in a wagon. It seemed fitting, somehow two independent people choosing to journey together, neither leading nor following but moving forward as equals. They arrived at their cabin as twilight deepened into dusk. Vincent dismounted first, then helped Catherine down from Daisy. Before she could move toward the door, he swept her into his arms. "I believe this is traditional," he said with a smile, carrying her across the threshold. Inside, he had prepared a surprise. The fireplace was laid ready to light, the tables set with their new dishes and vases of autumn flowers placed throughout the room. Oil lamps cast a warm glow over everything, making the simple cabin feel like a palace. "Oh, Vincent," Catherine breathed, taking it all in. "It's perfect." He set her gently on her feet, his arms remaining around her waist. "Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn." The name, her new name, made Catherine smile. "I like the sound of that, as do I." Vincent brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I still can't quite believe you're my wife." "Believe it," Catherine said softly, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, the barriers between them finally gone, Catherine thought of how far she had come since that day in Rattlesnake Canyon. From a broken wagon wheel to a mended heart, from solitude to partnership, from uncertainty to purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, his voice low in the darkness as he traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "How fortunate I am that my wheel broke in that particular canyon on that particular day," Catherine replied honestly. Vincent chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. "I've been thinking the same thing, though at the time I imagine you felt anything but fortunate." "True enough," Catherine admitted. "I was terrified, furious, and completely at a loss." "And now?" Vincent asked, his hand stilling on her skin. Catherine raised herself on one elbow to look into his face, barely visible in the moonlight filtering through the window. "Now I know it wasn't misfortune at all, but the greatest blessing of my life." The years that followed brought changes both expected and surprising. The small cabin expanded as their family grew, first with the birth of their son James in the summer of 1871, followed by twins Emily and Ethan in 1873. By 1875, Vincent owned half of Silvercrest Ranch, the operation thriving under his management. Catherine's farm flourished as well, the orchard producing abundant harvests and the vegetable gardens expanding each year. She became known throughout the region for her preserved fruits and vegetables, selling them in Truckee and even shipping some to merchants in larger towns. They faced challenges, of course, harsh winters, dry summers that threatened crops and grazing land, occasional illness. But they faced each difficulty together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. On a warm spring day in 1879, nearly 10 years after their first meeting, Catherine and Vincent stood together on the porch of their home, now a comfortable 4-bedroom house that had grown around the original cabin. Their children played in the yard, James teaching the twins how to fly the kite he had made, their laughter carrying on the breeze. "Do you ever think about that day in the canyon?" Vincent asked, his arm around Catherine's waist. "Often," Catherine admitted. "Especially in spring when the light in the canyon is just so." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you?" Vincent nodded. "I was riding to town for supplies we didn't actually need. Thomas could have gone, or one of the other hands. But something told me to go myself that day, to take that route through the canyon instead of the main road." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, now streaked with a few strands of silver among the chestnut. "Best decision I ever made." Catherine smiled, watching their children, James with his father's blue eyes and her determined chin, Emily with her mother's chestnut hair, and Ethan who somehow resembled both of them equally. "Do you remember what you said when you fixed my wagon wheel? Good as new, better, in fact." Vincent chuckled. "I was talking about the wheel." "I know," Catherine replied, turning in his arms to face him, "but it applied to other things too." Vincent's eyes, still as blue as the day they met though now crinkled permanently at the corners from years of sun and smiles, softened as he gazed at her. To us," Catherine confirmed. "To my heart, which wasn't just mended but made stronger for having been broken." She reached up to touch his face, the familiar contours as dear to her as her own reflection. "I love you, Vincent Quinn, more today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "And I love you, Catherine Quinn," Vincent replied, leaning down to kiss her with the same tenderness as their wedding day. "Always have, since a broken wagon wheel brought you into my life. Always will." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they remained on the porch, arms around each other, watching their children play. Two lives that had once been separate paths, brought together by chance or fate, or perhaps something more deliberate, a divine hand guiding a wagon wheel to split at precisely the right moment in precisely the right canyon. Sometimes, Catherine reflected, the greatest blessings come disguised as misfortunes. And sometimes, a broken wheel leads exactly where you were meant to go all along.